what my coaching trios have done, but I think A, none of them could be here.
Yes.
And B, well, the ones who haven't done it, and B, I just thought everyone's doing roughly the same, and there's been quite a lot. So after my observation, Margaret got me to sort of look at the criteria, and that's the only time, I think, where I really sit down and think about what I've done. So that got me thinking that we probably don't do, maybe it's just me, but we probably don't do enough thinking after a lesson about how that lesson's gone, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I did a load of investigating and came up with this lot.
Thank you.
So the first bit's just loads of things about why you might want to sort of evaluate what you do, and just, you know, that we should be anyway, you know, we should be thinking about what we do for them, we should be thinking about what goes on in our classroom and how that impacts on the whole, you know, what goes on in the whole school. You know, reasons why we might want to self-evaluate, yet you might feel, you know, it's not something you're going to do at the end of every single lesson all the time, but there might be a particular group where you feel you're losing their attention or motivation, so, you know, you want to rethink some strategies. If they're not making the progress that they should be, just after you've marked work, if you think, you know, there's someone else doing something you'd perhaps like to use, or you've seen something really good, how that would fit in. So I just like this, you know, did I make a difference today, and how do I know, you know, how do we know that we have? So I then found some questions which I sort of adapted a little bit. There was this questionnaire where you could assign a number. So I sort of adapted these, but also as I was doing them, thought that people might, you know, you could add in things of your own that maybe were specific to your subject or what you were looking at. And sort of some, the stuff I sort of took off the internet came up with that you could grade them from 1 to 5. So the idea is that the sort of big in bold, so the first one, I create and maintain an atmosphere for learning. It's not that you sort of give yourself a grade overall, and they're just ideas to get you thinking about whether all those things apply to you. So if you're going to do 1 to 5, you know, obviously you'd only put a 5 if all those things. You know, you thought you were doing all those things, you know, if you think you do some of them reasonably well, you might give yourself a 4 or a 3. So there's just all these little statements. And the idea is that you will sort of grade yourself. You wouldn't have to, you could just use them to think where you sort of fit in. Yeah. So there's one about, you know, the environment and you know, what the learning environment's like in your class. The C is just, you know, how much teacher talk and that sort of thing you do. D is about questioning. E is, you know, sort of really to do with the learning objectives, and is it really clear what the purpose of the lesson is. Then there's one on written and sort of oral assessments. I really liked the last one on that, where it said my assignments require students to comprehend ideas, apply these ideas, analyse, synthesise and evaluate information rather than simply memorise and reproduce facts. Because, you know, that's obviously can be tempting to do that, particularly near exam time. And, you know, that's not the best way usually for them to learn. Then there's one on how well you evaluate sort of their work and yours. Then there's one on sort of classroom routines, and then one on, you know, are you being fair and, you know, impartial. And I just thought they were really good ideas. So I've done it after a couple of my lessons, which is tough at this time of the year.
Yeah.
And yeah, it did get you thinking, and also makes you think about what you're going to do next a bit more. You know, and I'm definitely going to use it a little bit in September after those first few weeks. But yeah, how happy am I with how things are going? So, yeah.
I like that very much. I like the questions, and as you say, you know, nine times out of 10. And I don't know. I think perhaps, you know, schemes of work can now be limiting for some people, and so that fear of, well, they haven't quite got it, or I haven't quite embedded that knowledge yet, but I need to move on.
And I think we just don't, apart from a lesson observation where someone else has made you sit down and really think about what you've done in that lesson, we're too busy moving on to the next class or the next. So I think by making yourself sort of do this every now and then, I just found it useful. It is tricky to do at this time of year, but I am gonna, and I'm not entirely sure that all the statements are quite what I'd want. I had obviously I got most of it from something else, but I then tried to adapt some of them to sort of work for us. But I could see as I was using, and I updated a couple after I used it, and I could see that it might be something I keep updating and sort of maybe make it a bit more personalised as well. But it was just some ideas, and it does make you think about, yeah, you know, you think, oh yeah, that lesson went well. Well, actually, what does that lesson went well mean? You know,
yes.
Is it because you think they were, you know, it was quite quiet and they looked like they were getting on? Because that's not always what makes things go well, is it? So, you know, when we do, you know, people have talked about doing student voice and asking the students what they feel, but how much do we really sit back and ask ourselves? I don't know. Maybe everybody else does do that.
No,
But I don't, except when I've had lesson observation.
That's the thing, that whole time through like education, becoming a teacher, and like when I did my master's in education, it's all about reflecting, and it's the one thing that we just don't make time for.
No.
And you're right, like when we have observations, you really do reflect, and it does make a difference. Like for my last observation, I did something completely out of the blue, because I was like, I could have done, you know, you have those like banked kind of lessons that you can kind of pull out, and I was just like, actually I'm just going to do something completely new, and it's really good. Like it was good feedback, but then it was like, oh, okay, like it's the first time I'm actually going to reflect on a lesson that's new, completely new and completely different way of doing things, and it makes such a big difference. Cause it's something positive and it's really good for the student. Yeah, I don't think
we just don't.
Any of us make enough time for reflecting.
So this sort of has made me, you know, and because I've invested some time in doing it, I think I'm more likely to try and do it more next year. So
have you changed any, tweaked any practice just in the light of doing your couple of lessons? Is there anything that you've become aware of and you're saying,
yeah, working out how far people have got more, you know, and thinking more carefully about where to go next lesson, rather than, it's quite, in my classroom, if I'm not careful, because I've got my top table and my bottom table, and then my vulnerable table all at the front, I can lose. I assume that the back are in between there, you know, and that's not always true. So it's made me actually find out a bit more, you know, how people have got on. I realised that I wasn't quite, I thought I knew where people were, and I've sort of made assumptions because I know where they are, but actually I can't forget those. So but that's all really at the minute. I think it is a sort of difficult time to do something.
I think other people may well be interested in picking that up, using those questions, and there could be a little action research type project around, you know, staff or teacher self-reflection, and how we make time for that. It would be really interesting. You found some questions there to
there was lots of stuff.
I'm sure.
You know, there's lots of stuff out there. It's just then picking off what you think would be useful. See, I quite liked this because it was quite practical. It wasn't like the question, you know, the idea of giving yourself sort of statements and scoring yourself was sort of, something practical you could do rather than reading loads of things.
And then of course you can take it to 360, can't you? Because you can do it for yourself. You could have a peer observer do it for you, and you could have students do it.
Yeah.
And so, do you remember that 360 that we did before? There are lots of programs around where you can, you know, you can actually put in your own scores, and then match it against someone else's perception and the student
Yeah.
perception. But I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I just thought it was, something we don't do enough.
And we're
I
we're
wanted to talk about something that was perhaps different, you know.
we're probably pretty good at picking up when we think something's gone wrong,
Yeah,
and
but that's when something obvious has
That's
gone
right.
wrong, something almost big has gone wrong. I don't think we necessarily look into, I think we too often think, yeah, no, that went well and that was fine. Yeah, you know, rather than look more in depth at what's going on. I don't know.
have you done any of that kind of, done anything like that?
Self-reflection.
Mm.
I really would only mirror what John said, which
Mm.
is since I trained, well, when I trained I did a lot, and
Yeah.
I do find myself thinking, well, how could I have done that better? I spent too long explaining that. I'm sure there was a quicker way, and then you kind of tweak lessons, and you kind of go back to it if you've got an opportunity to teach it again. But I think kind of day by day, lesson by lesson, I have to hold my hand up and go, I don't do as much as I should.
This also sort of gets you to think about other things as well, like your classroom, how you are in the classroom, sort of those sorts of things as well, not just about how you deliver things and the content. It's also sort of gets you to sort of think about the bigger picture. I think when you've been teaching a long time, you
lazy
can
and
get, and you can sort of, it's harder to try things that are new, or you get set in your ways of sort of how you deliver things, and that, like you said, trying something new for an observation, and it is harder when you know that, usually things work, kids do all right, so there aren't any problems.
But even lots of people have said they need to work on questioning, and that's, and those statements
Yeah.
about questioning are really quite useful. Yes, thank you for sharing, and tell us how it goes at the start of next year.
Yeah, I'll give it a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because I think you go through that honeymoon period, don't you? It's sort of, and then you start to think, I'm not really happy. About 4 or 5 weeks in, I'm not happy with how that's going.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie.